Hello and welcome to GCSE Organisation with Mrs Castanera here. We're on lesson 10, Plant Organisation. So today our keywords are organism, organ system, organ and tissue. By the end of the lesson you'll know what all of these words mean and how to use them and to explain what they are. So I'd like you to start by having a go at the knowledge check, please. There are 8 questions, so pause the video whilst you do that, please. Okay, let's review those questions. Make sure you're marking in a different coloured pen. I've picked a green one. So it's clear what you've written for your answers and what you're writing as corrections. Question 1. State where the specimen is placed on a microscope. So the pet specimen is in a slide, but it's placed on the stage. Identify what part of a microscope clears the image for view. So the condenser is what helps produce a clear image. Question 3, state why a dye is used. So a dye allows us to see the colourless specimens more clearly. When you take a very thin section of something like an onion cell or an onion plant, you get to see these cells, but they're so thin, they're see-through. Giving a stain to it allows you to see the edges of all the structures and the details inside each of those cells. Identify the dye used on plant cells. Well, we use 2 different ones usually. It could be iodine or methylene blue. Either of those answers will get you the mark. Question 5. State 2 things that have to be included on a drawing. We must include scale and magnification. Please ensure you have both of those, please. Make sure that you're writing down all the corrections that you need and all the incomplete answers that you need to add. Question 6. State the function of a cell membrane. So it controls what enters and exits the cell. Question 7. State the function of a cell wall. The cell wall strengthens and protects the cell. I'll accept either of those, but you do need to make sure you write both down as extras if you've only got one of them. Question 8. Identify what a cell wall is made from. Well, it's made from cellulose. Now there are 8 questions there. Give yourself a mark out of 8, please. We're going to move on to the overview now. This is what we're learning this lesson. So we're going to know that a plant is a multicellular organism made up of cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. We're going to know some examples of plant tissues, their functions and adaptations to support the functions. Okay, so we're going to move on to organisation now. So under the subheading of organisation, this is about plants. Well, plants and animals have the same basic structure from the smallest cells upwards. A group of similar cells work together to form a tissue. Now we know these definitions. Tissues work together to make an organ. A group of organs form an organ system. And the main plant organs, and you do need to know this, is the roots, stem, leaf, and flower. Each of those has their own tissues, but some tissues are common to all of them, and some tissues are specialised to just one part of the plant. Now, epidermal tissue covers the whole of the plant like a skin. Okay, you may have heard of skin called an epidermis. Now, plants don't have skin, they have epidermal tissue. Xylem and phloem, well, they transport water, ions, and nutrients around the plant. Now, the xylem transports water and the phloem transports ions. The xylem transports water and ions. The phloem transports sugars. So that's like glucose. Okay, so meristem tissue. So that's found at the tips of shoots and roots. And it can differentiate or change into different types of cells to allow for plant growth. Palisade mesophyll, that's a type of tissue that is found only in the leaf, and this is where photosynthesis occurs. And spongy mesophyll, again found only in the leaf, has big air spaces, and that's between the cells to allow for the diffusion of gases. Okay, so what I want you to do now is watch the following video clip. Make notes of the key content on the student notes page. If you've got a digital copy of this booklet, which you should have, then you can click on that link through that booklet. Please pause the video whilst you watch that and then come back. Leaf structure. So the leaf is the powerhouse of the plant. That means it's where the plant gets all its energy. Okay, it's the site of photosynthesis. It provides the energy for the plant to live. So this organ, the leaf is an organ, so the leaf organ contains many different plant tissues, including epidermal, xylem, phloem, and mesophyll. Okay, so here we have a diagram of a cut through of a leaf. Okay, so we have the waxy cuticle. I'm going to add the word waxy here because it often refers to it as a waxy cuticle. Now that typically is the sort of waxy covered surface of the leaf at the top. Then we have underneath, we have the lower surface of the leaf. Okay, again the waxy cuticle. And here we have a stoma. Now a stoma is where air comes in and out of the plant. And the stoma is surrounded by these guard cells. So the guard cells are either side of the stoma. They open and close to allow the air in and out of the plant. Now, here we have a vein, a bit like humans have veins that transports blood. Plants have veins, but their veins are divided into two different parts with two different tissues. We have the xylem tissue here, transporting water and ions. We have the phloem tissue at the bottom here, in sort of pinky purple colour, and that transports the sugars. Okay, now there are different, this here is the Collenchyma. We're not going to worry too much about the Collenchyma for now. Now we have the upper epidermis, that's this thick layer here. Okay, we have the Palisade mesophyll, which is long, deep cells which contain the chloroplasts. In fact, you can see the chloroplasts here. I'm going to label one. So chloroplasts are found in the Palisade mesophyll. Okay, so this spongy mesophyll has air spaces. And you can see that here. You can see all the sort of gaps between the cells. And then we have the lower epidermis, which is just the bottom layer of the leaf. So, the function. So, the waxy cuticle, which is labelled on the diagram at the top, is epidermal tissue. And it reduces water loss through evaporation, so it stops water evaporating off the leaf. The upper epidermis is transparent. Okay, and we can add this to our diagram from above. Transparent, that means see-through. And that allows light to pass through it so it can reach these chloroplasts so that the plant can produce energy. Okay, the Palisade layer, the Palisade mesophyll we're talking about here, has a high concentration of chloroplasts. That enables a high rate of photosynthesis so that the leaf can produce lots of energy for the plant. The xylem and phloem, they form vessels or veins that deliver water and nutrients to the plant and carry the glucose away from the leaves, which is where it's produced by photosynthesis. The lower epidermis contains holes called stoma that are surrounded by guard cells. So the stomata or stomas allow air to enter and leave the leaf, or enter and exit. Say enter and exit the leaf. Okay, and so the air moves into the spongy mesophyll air spaces for increased rates of diffusion. So there's a lot of information here. We've discussed a lot of it in our picture above, and we've discussed it again. So as you can see by the amount of highlighting we've got going on here, there is a lot of key information. You need to learn specifically each of these layers, these key facts about them, and why these are important. So the upper epidermis is transparent so that light can pass through. The palisade mesophyll is the next layer. It contains lots of chloroplasts to do photosynthesis to produce lots of energy. The spongy mesophyll contains air spaces for gases to move around for an increased rate of diffusion. That means pulling water up the plant. And the lower epidermis, again, is waxy, just like the upper epidermis, to prevent water evaporating out of the leaf excessively. You need to know that the xylem and the phloem exist, that they travel as veins through the leaf, and that the xylem transports water and ions, and the phloem transports sugars. You need to know that the stoma are the holes in the leaf surface, and they have guard cells either side of them that open and close to allow air in and out of the leaf. Okay, so that's everything you need to know. Please make sure you learn that. Okay, so learning activity 1. You have 2 minutes. Okay, you can take longer if you would like to. Okay, and you're going to have a look at the picture of the leaf structure, which is on, well, the leaf structure is on the next page, but it's not labelled. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the leaf structure here. Okay, so the leaf structure above, we're going to look at this leaf structure. Then you are going to go and try and label it. Okay, so we've only given you one diagram. You're going to label the diagram and write the function of the tissue. So I'll show you where that is. So here on page 43, we have the diagram for labelling. So you're going to try and identify the different tissues and tell us some key facts about those. Okay, here we have a list of tissue types and the functions that they play. Okay, I want you to try and fill this out. If you're not confident, feel free to do this on the notes page, but we will go through it together. Okay, I'd like you to have a go at all of it, please, and then we'll come back to it. So pause the video whilst you do this. Okay, so let's go through that. So, as you can probably see, I have labelled this diagram, again, by hand. So this layer here is the upper epidermis, that's this section here. Then we have the palisade mesophyll, so that's this section here, and that comprises all these long, thin cells. Now, the upper epidermis has the waxy cuticle here, and chloroplasts, which are these tiny little dots that you can see within the palisade mesophyll. Okay, then we have the spongy mesophyll, which is this entire section down here, which contains cells, but also very large air spaces, as you can see. Also, the spongy mesophyll contains veins, which have the xylem carrying the water and ions, and the phloem carrying the sugars. And at the bottom, we have our lower epidermis, again with a waxy cuticle, this time with stoma, and guard cells either side that open and close for diffusion of air into and out of the leaf. Okay, so that's everything you need to have labelled in your diagram. Then we're going to move on to tissue type, which you should have completed the chart below. If you haven't, please pause the video again and have another go at that before you mark it with me. Okay, so we've got a variety of tissue types here. We have the epidermal tissue, which is a single layer of cells that covers the whole plant, or the epidermis. And tick them if you get them right, and add to them if you haven't fully got the answer. Feel free to use the student notes page if you need to, or the extra box at the bottom if you need to. So we have the xylem, which is found in roots, stems, and leaves. It gives support and transports water and minerals. The phloem, found in the stem and leaves, so not the roots and not the flowers. It transports sugars. The spongy mesophyll, it's found in the leaves and only the leaves, and it helps facilitate gas exchange. The Palisade mesophyll. Okay, so that is found in leaves and it's the main site of photosynthesis. And the Meristem tissue, which is found at the tips of the roots and the shoots, and it enables the plant to grow. So it's quite possible you haven't got all of those. Please add anything you don't have. You feel free to pause the video whilst you do that before we move on. Feel free to give yourself a mark out of 6 on this, but be aware it was quite tricky, and you've done very well if you've got more than 3 or 4. So you do need to learn this, but you've done very well at the moment if you've got more than 3 or 4. But this is key information for the exam, and it's really good content to learn because it's easy marks, you just have to know it. Okay, we're going to move on. So we're looking at the xylem and the phloem. So both of these tissues are tissue types for transportation around the plant organism. So they're for transportation, so moving things. And together they form a vascular bundle or vein, although they are actually totally separate. So the phloem tubes are made of elongated cells that have pores or small holes at the end, and this allows sap to flow between the cells. The phloem transports dissolved sugars that have been made in the leaves to the rest of the plant. So those dissolved sugars have been made in the leaves and they get transported to the rest of the plant. So the transport can go up and down the vessels, and this process is called translocation. It's the idea of moving things around the plant. Xylem tubes are made of dead cells joined end to end with no cell wall between them. So there's a cell wall between the phloem tubes, but not between the xylem tubes. And they have a hole down the middle. They contain a chemical called lignin that helps to strengthen them. Xylem carries water and mineral ions from the root hair cells, which is water absorbed by osmosis, and the mineral ions are absorbed by active transport. And these substances move through the plant and out of the leaves in a transpiration stream. Okay, so xylem, as we know, is water and mineral ions. They go from the roots, and the water is absorbed by osmosis. You need to know how the water gets absorbed. It's absorbed by osmosis. The mineral ions get absorbed by active transport, and they move through the plant and out of the leaves in a transpiration stream. So transpiration, what is it? Well, transpiration is the loss of water from a plant. Okay, so it's water coming out of the plant, and the side effect of that, it's a side effect of photosynthetic adaptation. Okay, now basically the stomata need to allow gases in. Okay, so because these stomata or the stoma allow the gases into the leaves, and they can easily be exchanged in the leaf. Okay, so because of this gas exchange, the water is evaporating, it's diffusing into the air. Okay, and that means that as the concentration gradient of water, because there's more water in the plant than the air, okay, so because of the concentration of water gradient of water, the water escapes through the stomata by diffusion. So water diffuses into the air inside the leaf, and then through the stomata by diffusion. Okay, now that's a lot of information. Okay, so the best way to explain all this is this video here on YouTube. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch that, pause the video, okay, and then once you've watched it, I want you to come and have a go at the checkpoint question, which is the main function of a leaf is to perform photosynthesis to provide food for the plant. Describe how the tissues inside a leaf are organised to maximise photosynthesis. So you may find you draw a diagram and label it and then write a little bit about it, or it might be that you write yours in bullet points. Either way, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so watch the video, answer the long 6-mark question, and then come back and we'll work through those answers together. Okay, so you should have watched the video now and had a go at the checkpoint question. So we're going to mark that together. Okay, so there are 6 marks available, and there are 3 sections that we're going through here. So there's the top of the leaf, the middle of the leaf, and the bottom of the leaf, or the lower part of the leaf. Okay, so you need to make points on each of these sections. So at the top of the leaf, if you've labelled palisade cells, or you said that there are palisade cells at the top of the leaf or at the surface of the leaf, that is worth a mark. Okay, if you've said that they contain many chloroplasts for photosynthesis, excellent. Or the idea that they have chloroplasts in them for photosynthesis inside the palisade cells. Then if you've said the upper cells, or the surface of the leaf, is protected by the epidermis, or you've labelled the epidermis on a diagram, that's perfect. Then the waxy surface reduces water loss from the upper surface, if you've written that, excellent. Okay, so that's for the top of the leaf. Okay, so there's a maximum of 4 for this section. Then the middle of the leaf. So spongy mesophyll cells are found in the middle of the leaf. Now there is large air spaces, that's worth a mark, or there's a large surface area, and that's to maximise gas exchange, or to allow for gas exchange. So anything around the idea of large air spaces or a big surface area for gas exchange, that's great. Now the xylem supplies water, and the phloem transports sugars. Okay, so that's a maximum of 4. Okay, and those sugars are going from the leaf where the photosynthesis made them to the plant, and the water is there to help the plant do photosynthesis. Now, if you haven't written these parts for photosynthesis and from photosynthesis, don't worry. Okay, you can still have the marks for that. Okay, now the lower part of the leaf. Now, the stomata or stoma open or close because of the guard cells. So the idea of the stoma existing and that the guard cells open them or close them. So there's 2 marks available there. Then the idea is to let carbon dioxide diffuse in and oxygen or water vapour to diffuse out. Okay, so or if you've written to allow movement of air. Into or out of plant or leaf. Okay, so either of these two is worth a mark. So this one's out of 3. Now, you'll notice this is a 6-mark question and we've gone 4, 8, 11 marks total. Now, the way 6-mark questions are done, it's a bit complicated. Okay, so first of all, you can have 1 or 2 marks for getting some of it, but you don't have to have something in every section. Okay, if you don't have something, a mark from each section, then you cannot get really more than 2 or 3 marks max. Okay, so as long as you've got something written for each section, you can have 2 marks. Okay, if you've only got like 1 or 2 statements, then that's going to be 1 mark. Okay, if you've got 3 or 4 ticks, then that's going to be worth 2 or 3 marks depending. Okay, now to get more marks, if you've written at least 1 statement for each section, that is 3 marks done. Okay, if you've written more than 1 statement for some of those sections and at least 1 in every section, you've got 4 marks. So to get 5 or 6 marks, you will need to have said more things. So to get 5 marks, you'll have needed to say to get at least 2 marks out of 2 of these 3 sections. So if you wrote got 2 marks for the top of the leaf, 2 marks for the middle of the leaf, and 1 mark for the bottom of the leaf, that's 5 marks. Okay? To get 6 marks, you need to have written at least 2 things in each section, ideally more in these sections. Okay? So as you can see, it's very hard to get 6 marks. So essentially, the easiest way, if all that has thrown you and you are not sure, okay, give yourself a mark out of 2 for each section and add it up. That's probably the simplest way to do it. Okay, and that's going to be the closest you're going to get to how an examiner is going to mark it. So how did you get, if you got 2 out of this, great. So you want to see how many did you get out of 2 here? how many did you get out of 2 here, and how many did you get out of 2 here, and then add those up. So if you got 4 here, you can get a maximum of 2. If you got 3 here or 4 here, you can still only get a maximum of 2. And if you got, doesn't matter how many you got here, you can still only get a maximum of 2. So 2, 4, 6, give yourself a mark out of 6. If you're really not sure, that's absolutely fine. Send a copy of your work to your teacher by email and they will happily mark it for you, okay, and let you know what grade you got out of 6. We're very happy to do that. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the final part of our lesson, the knowledge check on page 45. So there are 10 questions, so I'd like you to pause the video whilst you attempt those questions, please. Okay, so let's go through those then. Question 1, identify 2 plant organs. So you've got root, stem, leaf and flower, which I've missed off for some reason. So any 2 of those, you can have a mark. 1 mark for at least 2 plant organs. Question 2, state the function of the meristem tissue. Well, it enables the plant to grow, so it's all about growing. Question 3, state in which tissue photosynthesis takes place. That would be the Palisade mesophyll. Question 4, identify the function of the stoma. So the stoma controls gas exchange and water loss. So if you've written either of those, then you can have the mark, but gas exchange is incredibly important, and if you've missed one, please write it in. Question 5, define translocation. So translocation is literally just moving things around the plant, or moving stuff like sugars, amino acids in a plant to a different part of it. Okay, transpiration. Translocation can happen in other organisms as well as plants. Okay, so amino acids would be translocated around the human body, for instance, but it's still the idea of moving substances around an organism, such as a plant. Question 6, define transpiration. So it's the process of transporting water, you must say water, through a plant from roots to leaves where it will evaporate and diffuse away. So that's a long answer. Okay, so it's about transporting water from the roots to the leaves. Okay, and then this part is not essential, but you do need to write this in because the reason it moves from the roots to the leaves is because it's evaporating and diffusing away. So it's all about transporting water from the roots to the leaves. That's the shortest answer you can give and get the mark. But it's important to know, and I want you to write somewhere, that that's because the water's evaporating and diffusing away from the leaves, which then pulls the water up the plant. And that's because all the water is bonded together to other water molecules next to them. So it pulls it up like beads on a string. Question 7, what is the function of the cell membrane? Well, it controls what enters and exits the cell. Question 8, and this is a question from previous lessons, state the definition of a non-communicable disease. So that's a disease that cannot be passed on to others in any way. You can't catch it. Question 9, explain the function of the air spaces within the spongy mesophyll tissue in a leaf. So they allow carbon dioxide to travel up to the Palisade Layer where it is needed for photosynthesis. Question 2, suggest 2 factors, so you do need 2 of them, that may affect the rate of transpiration of a plant. So there's 4 available factors, light intensity, temperature, airflow and humidity. Okay, now you probably didn't know about some of these, particularly light intensity, but because you understand, or should understand, that water evaporates and diffuses away from the leaves, what's going to affect the rate of diffusion and evaporation? Well, things like temperature, wind. Okay, you can write wind instead of airflow, and humidity. Okay, so humidity is about how much water there is already in the atmosphere. So hopefully you figured out some of those on your own, but they were very tricky questions, that one. So we have a mark here out of 10. If you got more than 6, you're doing well. Less than 4 or 5, really you need to have another look at this, another go at this lesson, because you need to get more marks than that. 8 or more, well done, you're doing excellent. And that is the end of our lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to email your teacher and they'll be very happy to help. Thank you very much.